Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're unpacking one of the darkest, most defining nights in American history, the assassination of Abraham Lincoln. But listen, we aren't just looking at the tragic theater shooting we've all heard about. We're going to dive deep into a chilling, multi-pronged conspiracy that totally shocked the nation. We're treating this well-known historical event like the gripping true crime narrative it actually is, because, well, it was.
So, picture this. It's early 1865, and the Confederate cause is practically crumbling. Richmond had fallen, and General Robert E. Lee was right on the verge of surrender. Enter John Wilkes Booth. He was a famous actor, a total national celebrity, and a fierce Confederate sympathizer. He actually wrote in his diary that, "Our cause being almost lost, something decisive and great must be done." That really captures the sheer desperation of a defeated man trying to single-handedly change the outcome of a massive war.
Act 1. The Confederate Conspiracy.
To understand how we get to that fateful night, we really have to realize that this plot actually started out as a kidnapping. Initially, Booth and his co-conspirators planned to abduct Lincoln to blackmail the Union into resuming prisoner exchanges. It's crazy to think about, right? But after Lee surrendered at Appomattox, well, the kidnapping plan became obsolete. The plot rapidly escalated from a ransom scheme into a desperate, coordinated decapitation of the United States government. Booth genuinely believed that taking out the Union's top leaders could magically revive the South.
And here's the thing a lot of people forget. Lincoln was not the only target. This was a terrifyingly synchronized hit list. Booth obviously took the president, but he assigned Lewis Powell, who was a former Confederate soldier, to kill Secretary of State William H. Seward. And then he tasked George Atzerodt with killing Vice President Andrew Johnson. It was a three-pronged attack deliberately designed to plunge the entire nation into total chaos.
Adding a seriously eerie layer of foreshadowing to all of this, Lincoln actually recounted a chilling dream to his bodyguard Ward Hill Layman just 3 days before the attack. In the dream, Lincoln was wandering the White House, heard mourners, and found a guarded corpse. When he asked who was dead, a soldier replied that the president had been killed by an assassin. I mean, wow. Though Lincoln tried to brush it off at the time, looking back, the timing is just absolutely haunting.
Act 2. Terror in Washington.
All right, this brings us to the night of Good Friday, April 14, 1865. We begin at Ford's Theater, where Lincoln was watching the comedy Our American Cousin. Now, Booth knew this building inside and out, because he had literally performed there. Notice this incredibly granular detail. After showing his calling card to get into the hallway, he meticulously barricaded the outer door by wedging a wooden brace right between the door and the wall. He was anticipating a guard being there, and he wanted to make 100% sure he wouldn't be stopped once he got inside.
These attacks were meant to happen at the exact same moment, to maximize panic and just completely paralyze the government. Right at 10:15 p.m., Booth struck at the theater, while simultaneously, across town, Lewis Powell breached the home of the Secretary of State.
So, a crucial point regarding Booth's weapon. The Philadelphia Derringer he used was a small, single-shot pistol. It was notoriously inaccurate from a distance, meaning Booth had to get incredibly close to pull this off. He actually waited for a specific, hilarious line in the play, a line he knew for a fact would draw massive laughter from the crowd, and he timed his point-blank shot perfectly to let the audience's roar mask the sound of the gunshot. Just incredibly calculated.
Meanwhile, across town, an unbelievably brutal and bloody invasion was taking place at the home of William H. Seward. Lewis Powell bludgeoned Seward's son with a misfiring revolver and then relentlessly attacked the bedridden Secretary of State with a massive Bowie knife. But get this, Seward was recovering from a carriage accident at the time and was wearing a metal splint for a broken jaw. That medical device miraculously deflected Powell's blade, ultimately saving Seward's life.
And then, in a surprising twist of fate that fundamentally changed American history, the third prong of the attack completely fell apart. George Atzerodt was supposed to shoot Vice President Andrew Johnson at his hotel, but instead, he went to the hotel bar, asked the bartender some suspicious questions, got entirely drunk, and just wandered off into the night, tossing his knife away. Unbelievable, right? Back at the theater, total chaos had erupted. Booth slashed an officer, leaped to the stage, broke his leg in the fall, and managed to escape into the night. A young Army surgeon named Charles Leal pushed his way through the sheer panic and found the comatose president. As the doctors quickly realized the wound was mortal, Leal held Lincoln's hand. He said he did it to offer this deeply sensory and human comfort, just so the dying president wouldn't feel alone in his final hours.
Act 3. The 12-Day Manhunt.
With the president dying in a boarding house just across the street from the theater, Secretary of War Edwin Stanton essentially took over the entire U.S. government. What followed was an agonizing escape route for the assassins. Over 12 desperate days, Booth and his co-conspirator David Harold fled south. They crossed into Maryland, got Booth's broken leg splinted by Dr. Samuel Mudd, hid out in the miserable Zekia swamp for nearly a week, and finally made their way across the Potomac River to a tobacco farm in Virginia owned by Richard Garrett.
To ensure Booth's capture, Stanton authorized a massive $50,000 reward for him alone, which, by the way, is equivalent to over $1 million today. This huge bounty fueled the largest manhunt in U.S. history up to that point. We're talking thousands of federal troops and countless civilians furiously scouring the countryside for the fleeing actor.
The chase finally ended on April 26th. Cavalry soldiers completely surrounded Booth and Harold in a tobacco barn. Harold gave up and surrendered, but Booth absolutely refused. So, the soldiers set the barn on fire to flush him out. In the middle of this fiery standoff, a soldier named Sergeant Boston Corbett, going directly against Stanton's strict orders to take Booth alive, fired through the slats of the barn and instantly severed the assassin's spinal cord.
He was pulled onto the porch of the farmhouse, completely paralyzed and unable to even swallow. Booth actually asked a soldier to lift his hands up to his face. Gazing at his own hands, he whispered his final words, "Useless, useless." It was a stark, honestly pathetic ending to his grand, violent vision of single-handedly saving the Confederacy.
Act 4. Trial and Legacy.
With Booth dead, the swift hand of military justice came down incredibly hard on the rest of the conspirators. The tribunal's verdicts were incredibly sweeping, targeting absolutely anyone who aided the plot. 4 were hanged, including Powell and Atzerodt. Others, like Dr. Mudd, who set Booth's leg, were given life in prison, though a few were pardoned years later by President Johnson. John Surratt actually managed to escape to Europe and later avoided conviction entirely through a mistrial.
And we have to talk about Mary Surratt. She was the owner of the Washington boarding house where the plot was hatched, and she was sentenced to death. Despite multiple pleas for clemency, she became the first woman ever executed by the United States government. It's a really stark historical milestone that underscores the severe, zero-tolerance approach of a traumatized post-assassination government.
While the conspirators faced justice, the grieving nation participated in an unprecedented period of mourning. A funeral train transported Lincoln's remains on a 1,700-mile journey all the way back to Springfield, Illinois. Literally millions of Americans lined the tracks, lighting bonfires and singing hymns. It was this massive outpouring of public grief that forever cemented Lincoln as a national martyr.
When Lincoln drew his last breath at 7:22 a.m. on April 15th, the room fell completely silent. It was then that Secretary of War Edwin Stanton spoke these immortal words. Now he belongs to the ages. It marked the exact moment the United States lost its leader, transitioning him forever from a wartime president into an enduring mythos of American history.
Thanks for joining me on this explainer. And remember to always keep questioning the history behind the headlines. Before we wrap up, I want to leave you with one final thought to chew on. What actually happens when a defeated faction tries to alter reality with a single bullet? Think about how the shockwaves of this multi-pronged conspiracy didn't just end a presidency. By putting Andrew Johnson in the White House and eliminating Lincoln's vision, how did this one single night permanently and fundamentally rewrite the entire future of a healing nation during Reconstruction?